Hello, my name is Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm talking about there is no doer. The idea of a doer is really trying to claim ownership on something that's happening. Largely, this is because we have become somewhat hypnotized and, fooled by the conventions of speech, because every verb must be preceded by a noun, so to speak. And so, something is doing the action. That's just the way speech works. And so we come to this idea that, well, there must be something doing the action. But that isn't quite right, because there's other phrases following the conventions of speech that if you delve into, you find there is no doer, like it is raining. You can look everywhere for the that it is raining, and you'll never find that it, because that it simply does not exist. It is a figment of imagination. It's a convention of speech. It's just there to make the language work. There's just raining. There's no it and it is raining. But the conventions of speech have come to hypnotize and delude us into thinking there must be an owner. And so we throw er behind so many words. Instead of, in doing, there must be a doer. In seeing, there must be a seer. In hearing, there must be a hearer. And we get this idea that there's something that can claim all this stuff. But when you're doing this, you got to realize it's a fiction. It's imagined. There really is no one to claim it, just like an it is raining. I mean, think about it in a dream. In a dream, you're this dream character. And in this dream, you may have this feeling of, well, I am doing this and I'm not doing that. And, this stuff is happening. But however much you want to claim or not claim doership of what's happening, the fact of the matter is that the entirety of the dream is arising from consciousness, one consciousness. There's no one else in the dream. It's all just you. There's just consciousness. And as such, the entirety of the dream is not other than consciousness, and so everything is done by consciousness. Consciousness is the sole power, doer, you could say. It is it's omnipotent. I mean, it is the sole power behind everything in the dream. It is what the dream is consciousness. And so, to say, I'm doing that, if you're being selective, I did that, but not this, you're not realizing that the entirety of the dream is consciousness. But when the entirety of the dream is consciousness, and you wake up the next morning, and someone asks you, what was done in your dream, or what did you do last night, might be a better way to phrase it. We don't think of our dreams as something that's done in terms of, I did all that. Even when we wake up, we don't have this idea of, I did all that. And it's kind of a funny thing that we don't claim ownership of our dreams. But that's actually closer to the truth than trying to claim ownership of all your dreams. So I'm not saying that's the wrong way to go. I'm just saying, at some level, we already know we can't really claim ownership of everything that happened in our dream. It's not something that you can identify with and claim as yours. Just like self, Brahman, these are things that cannot be identified with. You can't turn it into a me and say, I am, as soon as you say, I am self, or I am Brahman, not saying as soon as you say this, that's the wrong way to say it. Because with conventions of speech, you could truthfully say, I am Brahman, or I am self. However, if there is a belief in a me there, then it's been lost. It's become a phrase that's believed by a me. But the truth of the matter is there is just self, there's just Brahman. And that cannot be identified with. That cannot be claimed. And so, while it can be said using conventions of speech, I am self, it might be more accurate to say there is only the self. Not even involving a me or I in there. But that's getting into semantics. And that's where I know there's a lot of arguments where, some people that think they're very clever will hop in and nitpick on how things are said and go, well, there's really no I or whatever, but it's conventions of speech. The real crux is whether an I is believed, whether a me is believed, whether there's identification. If you identify as self, if you identify as Brahman, you've lost it. Because anything we identify with is a concept. And a concept will always fall short of the reality. We cannot identify with the unknown. That which we don't know cannot be identified with. And there will always be parts that this body, mind, conscious awareness will not know. And as such, it will always fall short of the true self. And so the self cannot be identified with. And so even though we may say all is God's will, a good pointer, it's a good way to give up the idea of I'm the doer and give it to a divinity. And there are spiritual traditions that do this as a form of practice. In the end, there is simply just no doer at all. Because it's all the conventions of speech. In the end, it's the illusion of the conventions of speech. There's no it and it is raining. You don't need to have something claim it. There's just raining. Likewise, in the dreams that we have at night, we don't need to claim, I did all that. Most people don't. It's just dreaming. Likewise, the world is worlding. We are living. And there's just living. There's just worlding, and that's what's happening. There's just seeing. There's just hearing. We don't need to throw in a me or I in there and claim, well, I am the hearer. I am the seer. We don't need to do this. And so in saying there is no doer, we're simply just trying to point at there's nothing to identify with. You can't be the doer, the seer, the hearer, even the witness, whatever phrase you want to throw behind an identity of some kind. There's nothing to identify with. And as soon as you identify as I'm the seer, or identify as I'm the self, or I'm Brahman, as soon as you identify, there's still a me in there. There's still a me. And it's identifying with a concept, which will always fall short of reality. And so we're pointing at there's nothing to identify with. And we're also pointing at the illusion of the conventions of speech. Realize, you need, if you really look at it is raining, maybe look for another phrase like it, but there is no it, and it is raining. And so when you say, I am seeing, well, the I really doesn't exist either. There's just seeing. There's no seer. There's no I in seeing. I am seeing, the seer seeing. That part doesn't really exist. There's just the seeing. And when we say there's no doer, what we're saying is exactly that. There's just the doing. There's just the doing, there's the choosing, there's the worlding, there's the living. But there's no one to claim it. No one to identify with it. And in that way, you kind of just let things arise. Let what comes come, let what goes go, be with what is. But anyways, if you got any questions, comments, please post below. But until next time, thanks. Thank you much.